Okay. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulih al-Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sorry, it took us a few moments to, get all of the technical wizardry going here. And some of you may have noticed that the title, this is an ongoing class that we do here at the center called Understanding Islam. And somewhat more people coming. Anyway, it's, there's a class that we do, it's called Understanding Islam. And it has a kind of roving thematic of different things we cover. Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum salam. Alaikum salam. Make yourself comfortable.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you? Good, good.
So is this an adult class and youngsters class both?
Yeah, everybody's welcome.
Everybody.
Yeah. I tried to, we cover like a variety of topics. So, yeah, I like to change up the topic from time to time. It's just mainly just to get us to think, or I don't always like to use the word spirituality because that word is so undefined that when you say spirituality, it's kind of like, okay, well, what is it? And of course, it varies very much from person to person or tradition to tradition. But you could, I guess, think of it like that. I like to think of it more of like, what do we do, outside of the ibadat? Like when you're outside of salah, what do you do as a Muslim, right? So it's, that's the idea behind the class, is to try to get us to think about in a creative way how we can enrich our lives as Muslims and to expand our sense of being Muslim simply beyond, just, either praying or fasting. I had called the title of this class, actually, it was called Attention and Awareness, and I had called it Part 3 because actually we had two other parts to it. So I'll briefly kind of summarize a little bit of what we had gone over before. And the reason why I wanted to talk about the idea of attention is because if there's anything that we want to do, including obviously the prayer, but outside of the prayer, then we're going to need to have capacity for attention. So in English in particular, we use the word pay attention, right? You have to pay attention a lot, except that what we tend to focus on is the object of attention and less on the capacity for attention, right? So sometimes we find ourselves increasingly distracted, but we always don't know why. Why is it so hard to focus? I have friends of mine that when they come over and they see my book collection, and usually the first word out of their mouth is, "Did you actually read all these books?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've read them all." And they'll go, "Where do you find the time? How did you read them all?" Assalamu alaikum. And obviously at some point in time I had to pay attention. But it isn't that I simply paid attention, but I have cultivated the capacity to be attentive, right? And that skill of being attentive is useful beyond simply just reading books, right? I mean, obviously, reading books requires attention. In fact, they had an interesting study that showed that even college professors now, because of the advent of modern digital technology, right, and the effect that has on one's capacity for attention, found that even they are unable to read as much as they used to. Everybody goes online, and what you tend to read online tends to be a much more redacted, truncated form of what you might get, like, in a book. So they're finding it's not only just, young people today, so to speak, but it's actually everybody, including academics, are having a hard time. So, so for me, I guess after years of kind of circling around this topic, I find it useful to discuss because it's handy, like I said, not just for being able to read books, but it's really handy for anything that you want to do that's of value. Because what you pay attention to, as we'll see in a second, actually greatly defines what is of value to you. So and I think you guys might have been here, we had talked about this before. I think one of the biggest fallacies or myths maybe around the idea of paying attention is that we say like, oh, you're not paying attention, right? You might see a child and if they're not doing their homework or they're not listening, you're not paying attention, right? Or if you're a teacher in a class and your kids are on their cell phone, you're not paying attention. And what we don't realize is that we're always paying attention. It's just what are we paying attention to, right? The human being, in fact, that we can tell is almost incapable, like a normal, sane, functioning human being, is incapable of not paying attention, right? The question just is, what are you paying attention to? And when it comes to things that are supposedly of value or importance, why is it that increasingly people can't seem to lend their capacity of attention to things that matter, and they slip to giving their attention to things that don't? So one of the, and I'm not pointing any fingers, but I no. So just a real simple example is the Jumu'ah khutbah, right? Because I have the grand perspective, Well, Allah has the grandest perspective, but I have a pretty good perspective of who's paying attention during the khutbah and who's not, because I'm the guy that's up there in front, and I'm 6 feet 5 inches tall, so I can kind of like see out on the sea of people and see who's paying attention. And generally, within like the first minute or two, people are kind of paying attention. But even by the time I'm getting through the, in alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu, by the time I'm getting through that, I start to see people kind of looking around, and it's like, this ceiling is not that fascinating, right? 3 or 4 minutes in, it's a wrap, right? Some people are paying attention. And now part of that could be maybe my khutbah are just excessively boring, but I tend to actually get feedback that people say, we really like your khutbah. I'm like, okay. But then in my mind, I'm scratching my head going, but wait a minute, you were the guy 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 I caught you just kind of like, the point is, there is something affecting our capacity for attention.
You said that it's has become kind of seen everywhere, the teachers, the professors also. So why it's
right? It's not just the students anymore. Now it's even the teachers. Exactly.
Why it's so?
Well, I think that's there's some theories of it, and I do believe part of it is digital technology. I don't want to that requires a little explanation. So there's a great book if you want to read a book by Nicholas Carr, Carr, and he wrote a book called The Shallows, and he's like an investigative journalist that did some research about what was the effect of all of this stuff, right, on our capacity for attention, and he found that it's not only that you tend to multitask more, right? Because with this, right, I mean, I have Chrome, I have my browser, I have my pictures, I got Kindle, I got email, I got iTunes, I got WhatsApp, I got chat, right? But then even within Chrome, I've got 4 tabs open, right? And at any moment, at any time, unless you put it in like do not disturb mode, any one of those apps, thingamajigs, whatever, can go off and grab your attention, right? And then even when if you're on Facebook and you're just reading your friend's post, there's the ad over here, and now the ad isn't just a picture anymore, right? It's a little movie that's going, even though the sound may not come on, sometimes it does, right? So it's just excessively hard. Even if you wanted to go online and read the New York Times, right? There's all this other stuff that's on the side. So what we have found with attention for the human being is very much like a muscle, meaning that it can get fatigued, right? Just like your hamstrings or your glutes or your pecs, right? There's only so many times you can do so many push-ups or reps before you start to get fatigued, right? So your attention is related to some function within the brain that also can suffer fatigue, and it can also suffer stress, right? There's a difference. There's a little bit of difference between fatigue and stress, right? Stress, as I said, is that too much stuff at once, right? Um, so part of it is the digital technology, right? And it's a great lure for us. And I don't think any of us, I don't even think the most anti-technology person today would really want to give any of it up because it is incredibly useful, right? Even for my job, right? As imam, when I'm studying, researching, whatever I'm doing, it is incredibly useful to be able to access that amount of information on my phone sometimes, right? But that comes along with a price to pay. I think what we'll maybe get into or see is that we have not really developed a counterbalance to all of that stuff. And some of it is also just fueled by capitalism. I don't want to sound like, conspiratorial, but why is it that you can't just go read the newspaper, right, with flashing things, right? Now, it's true, the physical newspaper also has ads, but it is a very different user experience, right? When you pick up a physical newspaper, there are ads in there, but they're not like literally grabbing at your attention while you're reading the article. To me, that's what it feels like. When I go online, I feel like I'm being mobbed. Even though it's like I'm trying to get to just the one thing that I want, and there's all this other stuff that's climbing all over me. It's like a batch of kittens, You just want the one, and all the others are kind of attacking you, right? So to answer your question, part of it is the nature of, right, the technology. I think the other part too, though, is that it has a lot to do, and this is my theorizing, is we've been kind of lulled into a culture of leisure. Everything is kind of about taking it easy, about leisure, and therefore, what do we tend to do when we're not working? We relax, we entertain ourselves, right? We turn on the television, or now even that is very different than it was when I was a kid, right? The TV isn't just 3 channels and one of them is fuzzy, right? Now it's 500 cable channels and then every streaming service under the sun that you can think of, and they're all available on every single device. Like the other night, my wife was actually watching TV, but then like watching something. What are you doing? How can you do both, right? So it also has to do with this culture of leisure. And leisure is the kind of counterweight to work, right? We all go to work and we work, and then we come home and the idea is I need to relax or detach. The problem is that kind of just spills over and kind of gets out of control where personal development kind of goes by the wayside, right? I mean, people might go to the gym, right? I need to go and work out, but that's not quite the same as personal development. That's physical development, but it's not quite the same as personal development. I say that as somebody that goes to the gym and works out, even though I don't look like it. But so part of our as I said, connecting to the idea of a muscle, muscles require what? Training, right? Your muscles have to be conditioned. Matter of fact, they tell you when you go to work out, might be a good idea to stretch, warm up. And most importantly, the only people that actually look like they work out, unless they're just exceptionally genetically blessed, is because they have made it a priority to do so. And what gets in the way of prioritizing personal development, which is you're going to have to use attention to get there, is this overcommitment to leisure. So people don't read anymore, right? Overall, people just don't read. And then when they do read, they're reading 140 or 240. I think Twitter is 240 characters now. They added 100 extra characters, right? So when they are reading, it's short snippets. And if you go on, even the major, New York Times, Washington Post, or any of these like so-called news or media sites, look at the language in which they are writing today. It's, very, very short, very, very concise. And after a while, that also massages you into a mindset of never wanting to go beyond your comfort zone. Matter of fact, I think one of the quickest ways for most people today to go to sleep if they have insomnia is actually to just open up a book. And it's like,
Yeah.
right? It's true, right? If you can't sleep, just open up a book and you will, you're gone. Um, I was fortunate, I guess, I'm 45. I was born at a time when, yes, there was television. There was even, well, by the time I was close to maybe 10 or so, I guess there was like the first video games like Atari, but it wasn't that engaging. So for me, like the primary engagement was either going outside to play or actually reading books. I learned to read and enjoyed reading quite a bit, as a kid. So, that's because it's become a priority to me, and I personally really enjoy reading. So, bringing it back to the idea of attention, right? If we want to improve any aspect of being Muslim, whether that's improving our prayer, improving our charitable sensibility, right? Improving our character. Anything that we want to do, it's going to require we have to direct our focus at it. Directing our focus is our attention, and if we are not able to sustain that for any period of time, and even more importantly, make it a point to develop our attention, right? Because if you don't have the capacity for attention, it's like not having if you're really out of shape, right? You just can't go to the gym and just start pumping a bunch of iron and thinking you're going to whip around the track. It's not going to work. You have to slowly develop it. As a matter of fact, the healthiest way would be, a little bit at a time, perhaps on a daily basis, even just like walking. And as they say, actually walking is one of the most beneficial exercises that you can do. So we need to pay attention to attention and think about how we can maybe reverse engineer some of the bad habits that we've developed, particularly as it relates to being leisurely. Now, it's true, if you work and you do need to de-stress, right? But de-stressing doesn't always mean being passive. And I think that's the biggest thing of how we approach leisure now in this culture. It's passive. You come home, you sit back and click. And now, you can go on YouTube and, I think there's even like a streaming channel on Amazon's thing that's like an Islamic channel and whatnot. The problem with all of that, including the people now out in, the wonderland of internet here, the problem, truthfully, with all that is it's all passive learning, right? We need to have more active and experiential learning combined with the book knowledge or passive learning, right? In order to be able to transform ourselves. Because the hope behind talking even about attention is that it's, we don't want to just have attention. It's not like Pokemon, got to get them all. It's not like we want to have it just as a trinket or a trophy. We want to have it because it's going to do something that will allow me to get closer to Allah in this life, improve my relationship with Him, and improve my standing with Him on the Day of Judgment of going to Jannah, right? So I always, no matter what I'm doing as a Muslim, I have to consider Akhirah as how it relates to it. So I know that's I talk a lot, but anyway. So part of this, we had read through a little bit of a book by a academic. Her name is Gay Watson. No jokes. I actually did a search for her and it was horrific. I did some search for some of her other stuff. Don't go to Google and type in Gay Watson. You might be shocked. So she wrote this book called Attention. And it's a really fascinating book. And so she goes through kind of like what's the etymology or root even of the word protection, particularly in the English language, and it means to be present with, right? So I find that if a good place to start talking about attention is just like in the Salah. I've mentioned this, and you can be honest, because I had this problem too. And when I tend to get stressed, I get a little bit of, even as Imam, is how often do we takbir and start reciting Fatiha, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm reciting Fatiha. By the time I get to Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim or Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim, how many of us are truthfully present, even though I tend to follow more of the Maliki madhab in terms of we just make the takbir and go right into reciting, but most of you will make the takbir of ihram and you may recite the dua and maybe the isti'ana and isti'adha and then you recite the Fatiha. And most people I've asked this question to, they're like, yeah, sometimes I kind of wake up by the fourth or fifth ayah of Al-Fatiha, which is an indication that if your attention can slip that fast between Allahu Akbar and Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, that's it's a good wake-up call that your attention skill, your attention capacity needs some attention. Yarhamkillah, right? It needs some attention. So it's just really about, it's about giving heed, which is another giving way, right? When you give heed, like when you come to an intersection and there's a bunch of people, especially if the light isn't working or if there's like a stop/yield, right? If everybody just guns it, somebody's going to die. And if nobody goes anywhere, then people are just going to start honking their horns and getting frustrated, right? What you have to do is look at your surroundings and realize and say, you know what, maybe if I give heed, let him go or let her go and then I go, right? You have to be present in the moment. So in the same way, look at the wudu. Wudu, unfortunately, I think particularly in the West, is like, one, it's done in the bathroom, which I think is horrible. Because wudu is an act of ibadah. Wudu is an act of, it's an act of worship. And it's a great moment to actually, to prepare yourself for what you're about to do and lend your mind to the, to use a fancy word, the magnanimity of what you're going to do, like the weight of what you're about to do. You're about to go worship your Creator, right? So when you're making the wudu, obviously, like there's different like du'at that you can make, and just like sometimes it's funny too because when you're tired or if a person is in shock or whatever, like what is the thing? You can throw water on somebody's face, like really to get their attention, right? And there's a tremendous hikmah in that we have to put water. Matter of fact, many people don't know, many Muslims don't know that, like the sniffing of water and such is actually just a fadila, right? It's not something that's mandatory. Washing the face is actually one of the mandatory acts of wudu. So you have to like wake up, right? But many times, because we do it in the bathroom and it's treated more like a task, like a laborer, or very unconscious, just boom, right? That's actually a great moment. I mean, obviously you can't do this maybe at every single time if you're at work or if you're running late, but make the effort to prioritize your salah so that you can actually give time to the wudu as well, to put yourself in the position to pay heed, to give heed, to surrender yourself to the moment of what you're going to do, and to think about what that really means, right? I'm going to confirm my faith. I'm going to renew my faith. We think of Christians as being the only people who are born again, so to speak. But every 2 raka'ah you pray, you actually have to repeat your testimony of faith, right? So, like if you pray dhuhr, you actually do it twice, right? Because you have jalsa twice in it. So it's just, it's a way to really get into the small things, not always looking for the big. You can't go to Hajj every day, and you can't go to Hajj every year, right? You can't go to Umrah every month or all the time. You can't do the big stuff all the time. So a lot of the secret sauce to making our Islam feel like a lived reality is not looking for the grand epiphany, but looking for the opportunities that are given to us at least 5 times a day for us to deeply think about what we were doing. And therefore, when we have a conversation about attention or attentiveness, it's really a conversation about what are you committed to. And if you were to have the capacity to do so, I think I suggested this last time, like, keep track of what you do. Like just for 2 or 3 days, try to keep a journal of everything that you do. Like I went to the bathroom, I, got a glass of water. It'd be really interesting just to keep a log, like what you ate for food, what you did, and look at that and see if, see, I mean, because one, you're probably going to forget to log something, but you'll get a decent sketch or snapshot of what you're doing with your day, with your life, so that you can begin to condition yourself to not taking life for granted. One of the other things of why paying attention is important for us as Muslims is because we have what that's limited in this life. Life, right? Life is limited. Time is limited. We get, right? We know that even what the number of breaths that we will take in this life is predetermined, right? It's like over here right now, as if they were like a proverbial cookie jar. I remember as a kid, like your mom would make a batch of cookies and you'd be like, man, there's so many cookies there, and you just keep eating and eating, and then it's like, God, the cookies are all gone, right? That's like life, right? You didn't pay attention during the tasting, and then you feel regret or maybe, oh God, what did I do, right? And then it's too late. Let's try not to have that same feeling when the angel of death comes to visit every one of us, which is a guarantee, that we don't want to be distracted in the life of living, and then at the end of it have these regrets. Oh God, I didn't do what I should have done as a Muslim. I didn't pray. I didn't ask for repentance. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I should have visited more sick people. I should have, right? Because you weren't doing what? Paying attention. So this topic of paying attention isn't, just some, nerdy sort of dance of neuroscience or something. No, it has a legitimate application for us to better our lives as Muslims and to improve our relationship with Allah, right? So what's interesting, she said that it was used, the word attention was used actually quite rarely in the English language before the 17th century, right? And then it was about the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, we had this term attention span kind of come into our language. And we think of that now, like, what is your attention span, right? And the problem with attention span is it tends to be mainly a quantitative, right? If I can use a fancy word again, right? Quality versus quantity. I think most of you can kind of figure out what that means. Using words like attention span is looking at attention only through the lens of quantity, which is true. But as I said, I don't care how great physical shape you're in, eventually your body fatigues and it needs rest. The same thing actually with our so-called attention span, right? So, or our capacity for attention, it has limits, which means that you need to, at sometimes, stop paying attention to certain things and let your mind rest, which is how, as we said, you're always paying attention to something. So what is the one way in which you can stop paying attention? Sleep.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sleep. Why is it that people today have so many, we have health problems today that are so intertwined with many things we don't know. It's like you ever been to Staples and they have that rubber band thing that's like a billion rubber bands that looks like a ball, but it's actually just made of rubber bands? I'm like, man, who put that together, right? That's kind of like our health problems today. They're like that rubber band ball. And perhaps the shape of the ball itself, we could say it's kind of like sleep. It's like this big thing, but what is it, right? Well, the blue light from this stuff, paying attention to the TV, multitasking excessively, right? There's so many things that then impact our ability to rest. وَجَعَلْنَا لَكُمْ نَوْمَكُمْ سُبَاتًا. Right? Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Naba, and we made your sleep restful. Which means that sleep in itself isn't restful. Right? So we need to make sure that we're making our sleep restful. And it was the habit of the Prophet ﷺ, basically, outside, like once it got dark, unless there was something really to do, it was to go to bed. Right? Go to bed. And I had a friend of mine ask me the other day, he was just being honest, he's like, man, I really struggle with Fajr. He's like, I don't get how you do it. I was like, I just go to bed early. There's no secret sauce. I was like, I was like, my daughter goes to bed like 7:30, 8 o'clock max. And barring You know, see, right? Um, and again, unless there's something to do, but I like to go to bed early because I need to get up early because I need to pray Fajr. And then he's like, well, what do you do in the summertime when Fajr comes in at, 4 o'clock and doesn't come in, more in the morning, but Isha doesn't come in too? I said, well, I tend to find if I'm going to bed on a regular basis throughout the year, I can kind of get through the hump of summer. The other thing is that I'm good at like waking up and laying back down. And then I also utilize the winter months, just me personally, where sometimes I will actually go to bed because in the Maliki madhab, again, we have no issue of delaying the Isha until basically before the Fajr starts. So sometimes I will go to bed and then wake up like an hour before Fajr, pray Tahajjud, or rather pray Isha, pray Tahajjud, and then pray Fajr. And it's just it's not just being a creative way. And I said, well, the real thing is that I'm paying attention to the necessity of health, rest, and obligations to Allah. Like these have to be things that you carry in your mind all the time. They cannot be afterthoughts. Because when they become afterthoughts, you will, one, not do them very well, and then you'll be filled with guilt about not doing them right. And guilt, Islam doesn't really have guilt. We do have a thing called maybe regret, right? Matter of fact, when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about what is tawbah, he said, ad-nadamu tawbah, tawbah nadam, right? He said that regret is making tawbah. But the idea of guilt isn't exactly in our emotional tradition, because guilt tends to trap you and it doesn't free you, right? Tawbah should generally free you, right? Repentance should generally, free you.
Isn't the remorseful the same word for repentance or tawbah?
So tawbah is repentance, right? And it comes from the verb taba, which means what? To actually come back around. Because the idea is that when you sin, you kind of, not physically, but you go away from Allah. And therefore you come back to Him, right? It's like going and coming back. So taba, it has this idea of like, coming back to where you belong, or coming back to a spot. Where nedem, right? Nedem is regret, meaning you did something, it was wrong, you know it was wrong, and you are sorry that you did it, and you have the intention not to do it again because you know it was wrong. That's nedem, right? So when one of the companions asked him, like, well, I know Tawbah means to kind of come back, but he was just trying to get more like to the emotional aspect. He's like, feel regret for what you did, right? Because part of repenting is acknowledging what you did was wrong, which is why the Quranic narrative is often what, Rabbi inni kuntu min al-zalimin, or inni zalamtu nafsi, oh Allah, I was amongst those that wronged themselves, right?
So nadam is, in Urdu we call it nidamat.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah.
So being remorseful is feeling repentance, right? Remorse.
Right, it's an acknowledgement. You acknowledge what you did was wrong. Let's say, I don't know, you stole somebody's car, right? And you give it back. You don't steal somebody's car and then just, oh hey, here you go, man, here's your car back, right? You're like, sorry I took your car, it was wrong. It's not just a matter of returning it. Like you don't go to the store, steal 5 dozen eggs, and then bring them back and go, here. No, you acknowledge what you do is wrong. So nedem involves a capacity of acknowledging the wrongness of the action, hence you're wanting to ask for forgiveness, right?
The reason I asked remorseful because I heard that feeling remorse is a tawbah.
Right, and exactly. Hence the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ad-nadamu tawbah," right? That's what it is, meaning that you feel remorse and you ask Allah for forgiveness. The point is that if you aren't paying attention, right, or if you don't develop your capacity for attention, a lot of sinning can easily come from just not being conscious, right? Like letting your prayer just slide, right? Or, I've seen people that went from regular praying and then come like, man, I'm just not praying anymore. And I'm like, well, what happened? I don't know. I just, kind of stopped praying. I'm like, how do you just stop? I mean, you didn't notice? you know? And I say that laughing, but at the same time, they go, it forces them to look like, well, something happened. It's that introspection. Sometimes we call it muhasaba, right? Like to take account, right? Particularly, as I said, relating the need to pay attention is very important as it relates to our hisab, our account of what we will have on the day of judgment. And there's a hadith that's related by Aisha in which she was talking with the Prophet ﷺ. It says, "An Aisha قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم." He said, "حُصِبَ يوم القيامة إنه عذب فقلت أليس قد قال الله عز وجل فأما من أوتي كتابه بيمينه فسوف يحاسب حسابا يسيرا." So she relates that she was talking with the Prophet ﷺ, and he related that حُصِبَ يوم القيامة and عذب, the person that is taken to account, because of the passive voice here, the person that is taken to account on the day of judgment, عذب, is punished, right? And it's in the second form of fa'ala or taf'il, which means like punished, right? Because adab. And then Aisha was like, well, wait a minute. Didn't Allah say though in the verse that فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ, for the one that's given his book in the right hand, فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا, won't that person then have an easy account of what they did? And the Prophet ﷺ then he explains the meaning of the verse. He says, فَقَالَ لَيْسَ ذَلِكَ الْحِسَابِ, that is not what is meant by hisab, simply just having your book. He said, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكَ الْأَرْض. He said, instead, what I'm talking about is a person who essentially didn't pay attention, right? مَنْ نُوقِشَ الْحِسَابِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامِ عُذَّبَ. And because they didn't pay attention and they were neglectful, they're punished, right? So it's connected to this capacity of paying attention. When we think of paying attention, we often think of it only as a sort of like worldly utility kind of thing to use. Like, what could that possibly, be for the next life? And no, it actually really shows that it very much has a role to play in how we will be judged by Allah, and we want to make sure, we don't want to be thoroughly examined, right? So he explains. He said that the verse talking about the one that's given his book, right? He's saying that's just merely the presentation of their deeds, because if you did things right and sufficient, meaning everything, you did all your prayers, you asked for forgiveness, you fasted, you did good deeds, right? Then you won't have to be excessively examined. But he's saying that the person that will be punished, that will actually face punishment, is the person that will require examination, right? And he'll be required examination, or he or she, because of what reason? Not sufficient attention paid enough to, right, that sand in the hourglass that's running out and doing what you ought to be doing with that time. So it's a very interesting account that is saying that, yes, if you did things the right way, then your deeds will merely be presented, and Allah will give you your book of deeds in your right hand back as, yes, that is what you did. We don't need to open it up and look at it. Because again, right, Allah doesn't need to look in the book to see what your deeds are. Allah knows already, right? But it's this kind of procedure. But for the one that if your account requires examination, like, maybe this isn't all quite right. It's like you don't want to get audited by the IRS, right? It's like you do not want to get audited on the day of judgment, right? If you do your things correctly, you won't require an audit. You'll just simply get a certificate of validation, right? You'll get your book of deeds in your right hand, and that's it. Go on about to Jannah you go, right? The one, though, that requires, he said, it's like even if you wind up going to Jannah, because man qala la ilaha illallah dakhala al-Jannah, the one that says la ilaha illallah, eventually, inshallah, will go to Jannah. He said that it's punishment in and of itself just to be examined. Like you do not want Allah to, because then you got to be, every little thing is going to be picked out. Like, oh my God, right? And there's verses in the Quran that talk about those that will go to Jannah without any hisab, like without any detailed account of what they did. And therefore the how to, like, well, okay, that's great. How do I do that? Pay attention, right? And not only pay attention, but develop your capacity for attention so that you're utilizing those things that the Prophet ﷺ said to utilize. What's the 5 things? Your health, your youth, your money, right? Utilize these things before they are taken from you, right? Because if your health is taken from you, and all of us have probably been so sick at one point in time or another, we couldn't even pray, right? Or we could barely stand up. Maybe you have to sit down, right? And you see some people when they pray, some of the older people, they have to sit in the chair. That's not easy. I remember some of you know Yasin's dad, the guy that has the food truck, and he has like a severe like neck issue with like nerves and stuff. And one day he came in to drop off some food for Ramadan, for iftar, and he went over and I saw him praying. And he was like, when he was in sitting position in jalsa, he was like this, right? And when it was done, I was like, man, is he having a seizure? I was like, are you okay? And he's just breathing really heavy. He's like, no, I have a nerve problem in my neck. And I was like, well, why don't you just sit in the chair, man? He's like, it just doesn't feel right. Right? Actually, we wound up having this crying moment, right? It was very touching. He's like, I know I can do that, but it just doesn't feel right with my relationship with Allah. But then look, in order for him to have that experience, look at the price he has to pay for it now. That's just one of the ibtila that Allah has given him, one of the tests, right? So the idea is utilize your health, your youth, right, your time in a beneficial capacity to be amongst those people that don't have their things excessively examined, right? So that's pretty much what I have. Any comments, questions? We'll go a little bit deeper, inshallah, in the next session, but that's mainly today, just to put our mind, is that all of this is not just fancy talk. It's about developing a relationship with Allah that's very, very aware of limited time, and therefore I have things I have to do before I get out of here. Right? I have things I desperately need to do before I get out of here. I need to make sure I get them done from a quantitative point of view, but I also need to make sure they get done in a certain way, right? To the best way from a qualitative point of view, meaning like with ihsan, right? I do them with the knowledge that Allah sees what I do. I do them with the hope of the reward. I do them with asking Allah for maghfirah, right? So asking Allah for forgiveness. So inshallah, that's just something for us to maybe take in this week, think about, work on. And again, just asking Allah to, inshallah, give us tawfiq, to give us success in this.